We tend to have a lot of these conversations around things that happen in real life because we want it to be relatable and what people are going through every day. And this week in particular, we've had two different people approach us to talk about setting boundaries because that's something that's really freaking hard in relationships, whether that's your relationships with your significant other or your friends. And in this case, both times it was with friends, not really knowing how to have your social circle and not feel pressured to do things that maybe you're inside. You know what it's like. You know that it's not what you want to do. Like your soul is telling you no. Like, have you ever had that moment where your friends really are, you don't even know if they really want to do it either, but there's this whole group think that sets in and they're really pressuring as a group to do something. And internally, you're screaming, no, no, I don't want to do that. But just so you don't get abandoned or you don't feel like you are being left out, you conform and you say yes when your boundary is clearly no. Has that ever happened to you?
Countless times. Countless times. Uh, yeah, especially growing up, grade school, high school, college, and even into my 20s, as I was really attempting to understand myself. But my desire to be accepted was far greater than my ability or understanding of how to accept myself. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I feel like there's a correlation. We'll definitely talk about that through this conversation, but 100% the my desire to appease or um, make everyone happy, even if I wasn't, was a big factor.
And so then, even in the conversations we had, the question gets asked, how do I hold my boundary? Fine, I can write my boundaries. I can seek to understand what those boundaries are. But then how do I hold them without isolating myself or making my friends and my social circle, or really even at my career, if this happens where I work, because now I'm back in a work environment where I'm in an office and everybody's come back to the office with these new sets of rules that they're playing by. And how do I reintegrate into that and not make people feel like I'm just being, we'll just say it, like I'm just being a dick and not saying, just saying, no, get out of my face. Because that's what I feel like when I'm holding a boundary is I'm just being the jerk of the office or the jerk of the workplace. And I don't want to be involved.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially post COVID, working at home, there's probably those conversations of, no, Gary, this isn't like at home. You have to wear pants. This is, this is, so I'm sure that's not the most accurate.
I'm like, who is that person who showed up after going back to the office in their boxers?
Making a little bit light of it, but those things where you're like, you don't realize, and I'm sure this is just in general, like there are habits that we have at home that aren't what we have at work or aren't at where other places. And when, especially in a work transition, if we're using this as a really, which I think is a great example, there are certain boundaries that tend to they get forgotten.
Yeah.
And so our habits from home end up translating into the office. And there's things, there's one that I always get. And this is one where I see all the time. And that is the movie theater. Just for a quick side note, there are so many people who go to a movie theater and forget they're watching a movie around other people. And so they watch a movie like they watch a movie at home. And so it could be talking, it could be, um, making loud noises, or
Answering their phone.
answering their phone, or eating, popcorn really loudly, like right next to you, or
You have
just
to
little
understand, for Austin, anybody who is watching or listening to this, movies are Austin's sacred time.
sacred time.
And so that is a big boundary violation for Austin.
Yes. But there are things that I feel like that's a quick one that you can see, that I'm sure probably a lot of people have noticed that of other people when they're like at a movie theater, for example, and they see other people kind of act like they're at home, because it's dark and you don't end up seeing a lot of, you kind of forget. It's easy to forget that you're not at your house, and then you start talking midway through, or asking questions, or why are they doing this, in the middle of the movie, and as you're saying it out loud, and you're like, oh wait, no, I'm not home.
There
I
are
can't
other
ask. There are
people
other people
involved
here.
in this.
Yeah. So, um, so I know we're going on a little bit of a fun tangent here, um, but there's a lot of that when it comes to boundary setting, whether it's at the office or with friends, or especially with family. And this is the hardest one when it's with family, because you are so used to each other, and there are things. And so the moment that you start to enforce those boundaries, there can be a lot of friction going on there, because it's like, well, all of a sudden, well, why is there a boundary now? Because for so long there hasn't been.
Yes. Where did that come from, and why is it that you need a boundary? And one of the things that we were talking about with the individual that was seeking some guidance was, is a boundary universal? So if I do create a boundary, since we brought up all the different spaces you can have a boundary, is one boundary universal across all areas of your life? Or is there some flex in boundaries, right? This is something that I think is such a key and important question, because I can tell you, for me personally, the boundaries that I have in my life, some of them are universal, point blank. There is one boundary and it transcends across all aspects of my life. Then there are some that are according to the environment that I'm in. Some boundaries that I have in our work, career environment are not applicable in my family, are not applicable in our partnership relationship. So it is important to understand that you're going to have different boundaries across different settings. And then you're going to have some universal boundaries. But you need to figure out what those are. And then you need to enforce them. And you need to understand how you desire to enforce them and what you will do if they are violated. And that is a very key aspect. We also need to understand that enforcing them does not make us bad people. It helps us begin to understand that we are valuable. But not just that we're valuable, so are the people that we're holding accountable for the boundary violation. It means that we see their value and we know that they are not the single action they're taking, but they need to be responsible for the actions they're taking. I know that if somebody doesn't know my boundary, it's up to me to communicate it. Then I'm giving them an opportunity to respect it. That means I value them enough to believe that they can and will respect it once they know. If they choose not to, then it also means that if I hold them accountable and responsible for not respecting it, I find value enough in our relationship to say, I want to continue this relationship, but not in this way. If I don't, then all I'm going to do is start resenting them for not honoring the relationship the same way I honor it. Resentment, hostility, all of those things start to build up, and that relationship is going to break down. So if I truly honor and value that person and I don't see them as their actions, like single actions, one at a time, but I see them as an amazing person and I want to value that relationship with that amazing person, then I need to give them every opportunity to see me as an amazing person and value me as an amazing person and honor the relationship we're building. And I can't do that if I don't share with them where I'm at and what boundaries are being crossed and then hold them to that. Right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. As a funny side note, what comes to mind is Joey from Friends
How
when
so?
uh, Joey doesn't share food. Remember when he's on the dates
Yeah,
and
you like
and then
taking
like someone's
fries back.
taking fries and he's like, no, like this is, and he sets it up in the front, and someone could look at him as also say he's setting it up front. Because there's
Yeah.
a lot of times where we present a version of ourselves, especially in dating.
Uh-huh.
Well, we might do this with friends, we might do this with parents or people we want to see us in a certain way, and our reality is actually different. And so we lead on with a no boundary principle.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
eventually down the line, what we're doing is we're training the people around us, whether we are aware of it or not, that it's okay to do X, Y, and Z. But the reality is that might actually be a boundary.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, again, there's better ways to do things than other
Exactly.
ways. And so we could probably have a whole other conversation on whether that was the best way Joey could have shared that or not. But I believe if you it's dating me a little bit in terms of when I saw that exact episode, but I always thought it was funny. But what he would do is just like, hey, do you want your own fries? Like when he was attempting to order and saying those, and she was like, no. And then when he got the fries, and she's like, oh, let me have, that kind of thing. And so it's like, how do we best share where we're at without, as you said, getting hostile, getting triggered ourselves, or triggering the other person because you feel triggered, and then it becomes this chain reaction. How do we get in a space where we also don't lead people on and then pull the rug out underneath them and then expect them to know the whole time? That's another thing that happens, is like, well, how was I supposed to know that this, you've never said anything before this,
Yeah,
and
you let
ask.
me eat your fries like 3 other times. Why is it now an issue?
Exactly. And that's you. I mean, when it comes to family, that's probably gonna be a go-to um, answer when a boundary is starting to be either close friends or family. When a boundary is starting to be enforced, one of the first things I almost guarantee that you'll hear is, "Well, you never said this before," or you've never told me this before." These kind of things, like this reaction in that way, and they're probably right,
Yeah.
unless you can give ways that you have shared it and they just haven't picked up. And then it's conversation we were having earlier is, it's our responsibility as a sender of information to be able to effectively communicate and notice, hey, if it's not being received, then we might need to change the way that we're sending that information in order to make sure it ends up getting received. But again, you don't have to be a dick. You can be there. There are equal and lateral ways to do it, not not forceful.